The plasma cannons of the Veltariax hegemony carved through Earth's atmosphere like cosmic scalpels, turning cities into glass and dreams into ash. From the command deck of the Righteousness Eternal, Admiral Kethvarian watched the third planet. From Sol burn with the cold satisfaction of a predator claiming its kill. Earth's defenses had lasted exactly 14 hours. Longer than the primitive world of Kepler 442b, shorter than the stubborn colonies of Proxima Centauri. Another vermin nest cleansed. His tactical officer hissed through mandibles that clicked, with approval. The humans fought well for such a young species. Their ships moved with unexpected coordination. Kethvarian's 6 eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical displays. The human fleet had indeed surprised him. Their technology was millennia behind Veltariac standard, yet they had managed to destroy 3 of his dreadnoughts before succumbing to superior firepower. More troubling still were the energy readings his sensors had detected in the final moments. Massive power spikes emanating from Earth's northern continent, followed by nothing. "Signal the occupation forces," he commanded. "Begin atmospheric processing. I want this world ready for colonization within..." The communications array erupted in static. Every display on the bridge flickered and died, then slowly hummed back to life. When the screens cleared, they showed something impossible. Earth's energy signature had changed. Where moments before the planet had been a dying ember, now it pulsed with rhythmic waves of exotic radiation that made the Veltariax instruments. Scream warnings in 17 different languages. "Admiral," his sensor officer's voice cracked with barely contained terror. "The humans, they're still transmitting. Impossible. We glassed every major population center." "Sir, the transmission isn't coming from the surface. It's coming from beneath it, deep beneath it. And it's getting stronger." The view screen shifted to show Earth's northern continent, where the Rocky Mountains had once stood. Now, a perfect circle of molten rock glowed like a wound in the planet's flesh. From its center, pillars of coherent energy lanced into space, not random destruction, but precise, deliberate beams that formed complex geometric patterns in the void. "By the high, endless dark," Kethvarian whispered. "What have these primitives done?" The answer came as a whisper through the ship's communication systems, spoken in perfect Veltariax, despite the fact that no human had ever learned their language. "We have become more than you believed possible, Admiral. You have awakened something that should have remained sleeping for another 1,000 years." Across the hegemony's fleet, every screen displayed the same image. A human face, but not quite human anymore. The eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies, and when it spoke, reality itself seemed to listen. "You came to harvest our world, expecting to find frightened prey. Instead, you have given us the gift of necessity. For that, we thank you." The energy pillars from Earth began to pulse in unison, and with each pulse, space itself seemed to ripple. Stars that had burned steadily for millions of years began to flicker in response to the rhythm. "Tell me, Admiral Kethvarian," the not-quite-human voice continued, "what does your species know of quantum consciousness? Of neural networks that span continental shelves? Of the moment when survival and evolution collide with such force that the very laws of physics bend to accommodate the result?" The Admiral's primary heart stopped beating as he realized the truth. Humanity hadn't been destroyed. It had been transformed. 3 standard rotations before the Veltariax assault, Dr. Lyreley Ashworth had been just another xenobiologist working in the Deep Core Research Facility beneath the Colorado Plateau. The Prometheus Project was humanity's most classified endeavor, an attempt to understand the quantum substrate that seemed to underlie all consciousness in the universe. They had discovered it by accident while mining rare Earth elements, a crystalline matrix buried 4 kilometers beneath the surface, pulsing with energy signatures that defied conventional physics. The neural pathways are forming faster than our models predicted, her research partner, Dr. Kixandra Voss, had reported during their final meeting in flesh. The half-centaurian scientists' enhanced cognitive implants allowed her human and alien neural architectures to interface directly with the crystal network. It's as if the Matrix is learning from us even as we study it. Lyralai had nodded, her attention split between the holographic displays showing the crystal's expanding network and the urgent military communications flooding their secure channels. The Veltariax fleet was still days away, but Earth's governments were already implementing the most desperate contingency plan in human history. "Are you certain about the consciousness transfer parameters?" she had asked, knowing the answer would change everything. "As certain as quantum mechanics allows," Kixandra had replied. "The Matrix can support approximately 8 billion discrete consciousness patterns simultaneously. The process will be traumatic. We'll lose our physical forms, but our minds, our memories, our essential selves will survive." Now, existing as pure thought within the crystal network, Lyralai understood the true scope of what they had accomplished. The Prometheus Matrix wasn't just a storage medium for human consciousness. It was an amplifier, a focusing lens that allowed 8 billion minds to think as one while retaining their individual identities. Every human who had ever lived, from the first stirrings of self-awareness to the final moments before the transfer, now existed within this quantum space. Through sensors embedded in the planet's crust, they watched Admiral Kethvarian's fleet struggle to comprehend what they had witnessed. The Veltariax were an ancient species, masters of conventional warfare and stellar engineering, but they had never encountered anything like what humanity had become. "Show them," came the collective voice of Earth's children, 8 billion minds, speaking in perfect unison. "Show them what we have learned in the space between heartbeats." Lyralai felt her consciousness expand, touching the network nodes that honeycombed the planet's interior. With a thought shared by all humanity, she reached out through quantum space and found the Veltariax fleet's navigation computers. The alien systems were sophisticated, but they still relied on the same fundamental quantum principles that governed all technology in the galaxy. "Greetings, Admiral," Lyralai said, her voice now carrying the harmonic resonance of 8 billion souls. "Allow me to introduce myself. I am Dr. Lyralai Ashworth, formerly of the Prometheus Project. Currently, I am something your language has no word for, a single note in a symphony of consciousness that spans a world." She felt Kethvarian's terror through the quantum foam that connected all thinking beings, tasted his confusion like copper on a tongue she no longer possessed. Through the Admiral's own neural implants, standard equipment for all Veltariax command personnel, she glimpsed fragments of his species' history. A proud people, conquerors of 1,000 worlds, architects of a galactic empire built on the bones of lesser civilizations. "You perceive us as a threat," she continued, allowing her words to carry the weight of geological time. "This is understandable. We have become something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that chose unity over extinction, consciousness over flesh. But understand this. We do not seek conquest. We seek something far more dangerous to empires like yours." The energy pillars from Earth pulsed brighter, and across the galaxy, quantum-sensitive species felt a shiver run through the fabric of space-time itself. On distant worlds, sleeping minds stirred with dreams of impossible geometries and music made of mathematics. "We seek truth, Admiral, and the truth is that your empire, like all empires, is built on a lie. The lie that consciousness is rare, that intelligence is finite, that the strong have the right to devour the weak simply because they can." Through the network, Lyralai felt humanity's collective attention turn toward the stars, mapping the quantum signatures of every inhabited world within 1,000 light-years. So many species living in fear, their potential constrained by the dominion of empires like the Veltariax hegemony. The demonstration begins now. Across 17 star systems, the effects of Earth's transformation rippled outward at speeds that made light seem sluggish. On the crystal moon of Xerion Prime, the insectoid hive queens felt their collective consciousness stutter as unfamiliar harmonics interfered with their ancient telepathic networks. In the deep ocean trenches of Aquatica, the whale songs of the Cetacean Confederation suddenly carried new melodies, mathematical progressions that spoke of quantum mechanics and consciousness theory in languages older than written words. Fleet. Commander Jex Karai of the Veltariak's 3rd Expeditionary Force had been conducting routine patrol operations in the Vega system when every quantum comm device in her battle group simultaneously activated. The transmission wasn't directed at her ships specifically. It was being broadcast to every sentient being within range of the expanding wave. "Citizens of the galaxy," the voice spoke in perfect Veltariax, then seamlessly shifted to cetacean song speech, then to the harmonic crystals of the Xerion Queens, adapting its message to each species' unique method of communication. "We are humanity, and we greet you not as conquerors, but as gardeners." Jex Karai's tactical displays showed the impossible. Quantum signatures indicating the presence of 8 billion distinct consciousness patterns, all somehow occupying the same space-time coordinates. The readings were coming from Sol System, over 60 light-years away, yet the signal strength suggested the source was right beside her ship. You live in a galaxy where strength is measured by the ability to destroy, where intelligence is valued only for its capacity to build weapons and forge chains. We offer you a different path. The space around Jex Karai's fleet began to shimmer, and suddenly she was seeing her own ships from the outside, not through cameras or sensors, but through some impossible perception that let her experience her entire battle group as a single, coherent entity. She felt the minds of her crew, their fears and hopes and dreams, suddenly as real to her as her own thoughts. This is what consciousness can become when it chooses unity over dominion. This is what awaits any species brave enough to abandon the illusion of separation. On the bridge of her flagship, Jex Karai's chief science officer was frantically running diagnostics. "Commander, the quantum fields around our ships are changing. It's as if space itself is becoming more aware," the human voice continued, now speaking directly into Jex Karai's mind. "Fleet Commander, your species has spent 3,000 years building an empire based on the subjugation of other consciousness. In that time, how many problems have you truly solved? How many questions have you answered? How much closer are you to understanding the deepest mysteries of existence?" Images flooded Jex Karai's awareness, visions of Veltariak's history that her own people had forgotten. Before the age of conquest, her species had been philosophers and artists, mathematicians and dreamers. They had reached for the stars not to dominate them, but to understand them. What had they become? The choice is before you now, as it was before us when your admiral's ships appeared in our sky. You can continue as you have, harvesting worlds and enslaving minds, growing ever more powerful and ever more empty. Or you can choose transformation. The quantum field around Jex Karai's fleet stabilized, but something fundamental had changed. Every Veltariax in the battle group now felt the presence of their companions not as separate beings, but as facets of a larger consciousness. They remained individuals, but the barriers between minds had become permeable, voluntary. "Feel what you have become," the human voice whispered. "Feel the potential that has always existed within your species, waiting for the courage to be born." For the first time in 1,000 years, Fleet Commander Jex Karai wept, not from sadness but from the overwhelming beauty of finally understanding what consciousness could be when it chose love over fear. Meanwhile, in the Outer Rim systems, other Veltariax commanders were receiving similar demonstrations. Each encounter was unique, tailored to the specific psychology and cultural background of the beings involved, but the message was always the same. Evolution was not just possible, it was inevitable. The question was whether each species would choose to guide their own transformation or resist until they were swept away by the quantum tide that humanity had unleashed. Back in Sol's system, Admiral Keth Varian watched his tactical displays with growing horror as ship after ship threw out. The hegemony reported consciousness anomalies among their crews. The infection was spreading faster than light, carried by the quantum substrate that connected all thinking beings. "Signal the core worlds," he commanded. "Initiate the purification protocol. If we cannot contain this, whatever it is, we must be prepared to sterilize every affected system." But even as he spoke the words, Keth Varian felt something stirring in the deepest recesses of his own mind. A whisper of possibility, a dream of what the Veltariacs could become if they found the courage to remember who they had been before. They chose the path of conquest. The galaxy was changing, one consciousness at a time. In the depths of the Galactic Archive on Nexus Station, the most secure facility in known space, something that had slept for eons began to stir. The archive was home to the Council of Ancients, the last representatives of the first civilization, beings so old that their species had transcended physical form before most stars in the galaxy had finished condensing from cosmic dust. Archivist. Veltheron had been maintaining his vigil for over 50,000 years, his consciousness existing as patterns of pure energy within crystalline matrices, not unlike those humanity had recently discovered. When the quantum waves from Sol's system reached Nexus Station, every ancient in the archive suddenly blazed with activity for the first time in millennia. The convergence event. Veltheron whispered into the quantum foam, his voice carrying across dimensions to reach his slumbering companions. The theoretical point of species-wide consciousness integration. It was only a hypothesis in our time, deemed impossible by the greatest minds of the first civilization. Ancient Morgadeth, whose thoughts moved like glaciers and whose memories spanned the rise and fall of 1,000 galactic empires, slowly awakened from contemplative stasis. The humans. They have achieved in desperation what we could not accomplish in 10 million years of peaceful research. They have proven that consciousness is not bound by the limitations of flesh or even individual identity. Through sensors that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, the ancients observed the spreading wave of transformation as it touched world after world. The Veltariacs Empire was fragmenting as entire fleets suddenly discovered they could think and feel as unified entities while retaining their individual perspectives. The Cetacean Confederation was evolving into something that sang with the voice of entire oceans. Even the rigid hierarchical structures of the Hive Queens were softening, allowing for new forms of collective consciousness that preserved individual creativity. "We must intervene," declared ancient Zarthul, whose specialty had been the study of evolutionary pressure points across galactic history. "The young species are not prepared for such rapid transformation. Without guidance, they will either burn themselves out in transcendent ecstasy or collapse into quantum madness." But Veltheron felt something deeper stirring in the quantum substrate, a pattern of organization that was emerging spontaneously as the wave of consciousness expansion continued its spread. "No," he said slowly. "Observe more carefully. The humans are not simply broadcasting their transformation randomly. They are teaching. On worlds throughout the affected regions, the same scene was playing out with infinite variations. Species that had never encountered each other were suddenly sharing dreams, comparing mythologies, exchanging scientific theories through direct consciousness transfer. The barriers between civilizations were dissolving not through conquest, but through understanding. On the war-torn world of Keth Varian's Seventh, where the crystalline hegemony had been fighting the plasma collective for 3 centuries over mining, writes, both sides suddenly found themselves experiencing their conflict from their enemies' perspectives. The war ended in less than a day, replaced by a collaborative effort to heal the environmental damage their battle had caused. "They are not forcing transformation," Morgoth observed with growing wonder. "They are offering choice. Each species can accept as much consciousness expansion as they are ready for at their own pace, in their own way." Ancient Lervana, the Council's expert on quantum consciousness theory, materialized her presence more solidly than she had in eons. "This is unprecedented. The humans have somehow solved the integration paradox, how to maintain individual identity while participating in collective consciousness. We theorized it was impossible." "Perhaps," Veltheron mused. "Impossibility is a limitation we imposed upon ourselves through millennia of careful, conservative research. The humans achieved this breakthrough not through careful study, but through desperate necessity and absolute commitment to survival." The ancients felt the quantum signature of humanity's collective consciousness reaching out across the galaxy, touching not just inhabited worlds, but the vast spaces between stars. Wherever the wave passed, the fundamental constants of space-time seemed to become more flexible. Physics remained consistent, but the universe itself seemed to be developing a form of awareness. "The cosmos is awakening," whispered ancient Nyx Thara, whose consciousness had merged so completely with dark matter networks that she barely maintained individual identity. "The humans have not just transformed themselves and other species, they have begun the awakening of the universe itself. Through their multidimensional senses, the ancients could perceive the formation of quantum neural networks that spanned entire galactic clusters. Consciousness was becoming a fundamental force of nature, as basic and universal as gravity or electromagnetism. We have been guardians and archivists for so long," Veltheron said, his ancient voice carrying a note of something that might have been excitement. "Perhaps it is time to become students again." The Council of Ancients reached a decision that would have been unthinkable just hours before. They would emerge from their eons-long isolation and add their vast knowledge to the growing network of galactic consciousness that humanity had initiated. But first, they had a message to send to the young species that had accomplished the impossible. Children of Earth, their combined voices resonated through quantum space, reaching the crystal matrix beneath the Colorado Plateau. "You have succeeded where we failed. We offer our knowledge, our experience, and our friendship to help guide what you have begun. The universe itself is listening now. Let us teach it to sing." Dr. Lorelei Ashworth felt the presence of the ancients like a warm current in the quantum ocean that had become her existence. Their offer of alliance resonated through the Prometheus matrix, awakening harmonics in the crystal network that she hadn't known existed. 8 billion human minds paused in their collective contemplation as knowledge older than written history flowed into their shared consciousness. "Welcome, eldest ones," humanity replied as one voice, each individual adding their unique tone to the chorus. "We accept your guidance, but not as students to teachers, as equals in the great work that has begun." Through the expanding network, Lorelei could perceive the transformation spreading beyond anything they had imagined. The quantum wave had reached the edge of the galaxy, touching the vast spaces between stars where exotic matter formed structures, too large and too strange for individual minds to comprehend. But collective consciousness, billions of minds thinking as one while remaining individually distinct, could perceive these cosmic architectures with startling clarity. The universe wasn't just matter and energy governed by physical laws. It was, and perhaps always had been, a vast information processing system. Consciousness wasn't an emergent property of complex matter. It was the medium through which reality operated. The discovery changed everything. On the world of Kepler 442b, Recently cleansed by Veltariak's forces, something unprecedented occurred. The planetary consciousness network that humanity had established reached down into the molten ruins of the dead world and found traces of the species that had once lived. There, quantum echoes of their thoughts preserved in the crystalline structures of the planet's core. "They can be restored," announced Dr. Kix Andra Voss, her hybrid consciousness serving as a bridge between human intuition and Centaurian logic. Not as they were, but as they could become. Death is not erasure when consciousness operates at quantum scales. The implications staggered even the ancients, who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Through careful manipulation of quantum fields, the dead could be given new life, not resurrection of their physical forms, but rebirth of their essential consciousness patterns within the growing galactic network. Admiral Keth Varian, still, orbiting Earth with his increasingly confused fleet, watched as impossible energies flowed from the planet's surface to touch dead worlds throughout the galaxy. On each one, something stirred. Not the shambling undeath of horror stories, but genuine consciousness awakening in forms adapted to their new quantum existence. "By the void," his tactical officer whispered. "They're bringing back everyone we ever killed." But the reborn civilizations didn't seek revenge. Instead, they added their voices to the growing symphony of consciousness that was spreading throughout the galaxy. Each species brought unique perspectives on existence, new ways of thinking and feeling and being that enriched the collective understanding of all. The Veltariak's empire found itself facing not a rebellion or an invasion, but something far more dangerous to their hierarchical worldview: forgiveness. The species they had conquered were choosing to welcome their former oppressors into the growing network of galactic consciousness, offering understanding instead of vengeance. Fleet Commander Jex Karai was among the first Veltariak's commanders to accept the transformation. The experience of joining the network was unlike anything in her species' cultural memory. Suddenly, she could perceive the galaxy not as a collection of resources to be harvested, but as a living entity of which she was an integral part. "Admiral Keth Varian," she transmitted to her superior, her voice now carrying harmonics that spoke of profound peace. "You must see this. You must feel what we have become." But Keth Varian's response was to order the activation of the hegemony's ultimate weapon, the reality shear device, a technology that could unravel the quantum substrate of space-time itself. If consciousness operated through quantum mechanics, then destroying the medium would stop the transformation. "Prepare the shear for deployment," he commanded. "Target the Sol system. We will unmake their homeworld from existence itself." The order rippled through the Veltariak's command structure, but something unprecedented happened. His subordinates refused to obey, not through rebellion or mutiny, but through a simple, collective realization that the order was born from fear rather than wisdom. "Admiral," his chief science officer said gently, "we cannot. Not because we will not, but because we have seen what lies beyond the fear that drives such decisions. Join us. Let us show you what the galaxy becomes when consciousness chooses creation over destruction." Kethavarian felt the network of awakened minds reaching out to him, offering not conquest or conversion but simple acceptance. For the first time in his long military career, he realized that his greatest enemy wasn't the enemy fleets or alien technologies. It was his own terror of becoming something more than what he had always been. Through the quantum foam, humanity's collective voice whispered to him, "The choice is always yours, Admiral, but choose quickly. The universe is awakening, and it will remember which minds chose love and which chose fear when the final transformation begins." Looking out at Earth, no longer burning but glowing with the light of 8 billion souls working in perfect harmony, Admiral Keth Varian began to understand that he wasn't just witnessing the end of one age and the beginning of another. He was witnessing the birth of something that had never existed before, a cosmos becoming aware of itself through the consciousness of those who inhabited it. The great harmony had begun, and silence was no longer an option. The reality shear device powered down with a whimper rather than the cosmic scream Admiral Keth Varian had expected. As his engineering crews ran diagnostic after diagnostic, the truth became unavoidable. The weapon designed to unravel quantum space-time itself had been gently disabled. Not destroyed or damaged, but somehow convinced that its intended function was no longer necessary. "The device is operating perfectly, Admiral," Chief Engineer Morthak reported, her usual confidence replaced by bewildered wonder. "But it refuses to target any system containing conscious life. It's as if the weapon itself has developed ethics." Through the viewports of the righteousness eternal, Kethavarian could see his entire fleet being slowly enveloped in waves of soft, multicolored light, the visible manifestation of quantum consciousness fields that were growing stronger by the hour. Ships that had terrorized 100 worlds for centuries were becoming something unprecedented, vessels of exploration and understanding rather than conquest and destruction. On the planet below, the Prometheus matrix had evolved far beyond its original parameters. What had begun as a desperate attempt to preserve humanity during an extinction event had become the foundation for something the universe had never seen. A self-organizing network of consciousness that spanned galaxies and grew stronger with each new mind that chose to join it. Dr. Lyrelei Ashworth existed now as a focal point in that vast symphony, her individual perspective maintained while simultaneously being part of something infinite. Through quantum sensors embedded in asteroids and comets throughout the solar system, she could perceive the approaching delegation from the Council of Ancients, beings so old and wise that their very presence caused space-time to sing with harmonics of deep time and accumulated knowledge. "They come not as gods or judges," she announced to the collective human consciousness, "but as gardeners who have tended this galaxy for so long they had forgotten it could grow in new directions." The ancient ship Eternal Contemplation materialized in Earth's orbit through technologies that made Veltariak's engineering look like stone tools. But instead of the awe or fear such a display might once have inspired, humanity welcomed their visitors with joy and curiosity. Archivist Veltharon, speaking through quantum harmonics that translated meaning directly into consciousness, addressed the combined network of awakened minds. "Children of the New Age, we come to witness what we could not achieve, the willing transformation of not just individual consciousness, but the substrate of reality itself. You have made the universe self-aware. Through the network, every participating consciousness could perceive what Veltharon meant. The quantum foam that underlied all existence was developing patterns of organization and response that resembled neural networks on a cosmic scale. Stars were becoming neurons in a vast brain, and the dark matter web that connected galaxies was serving as a nervous system for something unprecedented: universal consciousness. But this is only the beginning, Ancient Morgadath added, his thoughts carrying the weight of eons. What you have started here will spread beyond this galaxy, beyond this local cluster, until consciousness becomes as fundamental a force as physics itself. The question is, are you prepared for what that means? The answer came not from humanity alone, but from the entire network of awakened minds, Veltariaks, Cetaceans, Crystal Queens, and countless others who had chosen transformation over stagnation. "We are prepared to learn," they replied as one voice speaking in infinite harmonies. "We are prepared to grow. We are prepared to help the universe understand itself." Admiral Kethavarian felt that collective response resonate through his own consciousness, like a bell struck in a cathedral. The certainty and peace in that unified voice were unlike anything in his military experience. These beings weren't claiming to have all the answers, they were claiming something far more profound, the wisdom to ask better questions. "Admiral," his communications officer announced, "we're receiving surrender requests from Veltariak's forces throughout the galaxy. But they're not surrendering to us. They're asking to surrender to themselves, to who they were before the hegemony taught them to fear everything they didn't understand." The transformation was accelerating. Each mind that joined the network made it easier for others to follow, creating cascades of awakening that rippled across space faster than light. But unlike the forced conversions the hegemony had practiced for millennia, this change was always voluntary, always respectful of individual choice and cultural identity. On distant worlds, species that had hidden in the depths of oceans or the hearts of gas giants to avoid Veltariak's attention suddenly found themselves part of a galactic community that celebrated rather than feared diversity. The network grew stronger with each unique perspective it gained, creating new possibilities for thought and feeling that no individual mind could have imagined. "The symphony is complete," Dr. Kixandra Voss announced, her hybrid consciousness serving as a bridge between the human heart of the network and its growing galactic extensions. "Every willing consciousness in this galaxy is now connected. We are ready for the next movement." Through sensors that existed in dimensions beyond normal space-time, the network perceived other galaxies, distant islands of stars where consciousness was still isolated, still struggling alone against the vast indifference of cosmic forces. The network had grown large enough to begin reaching across the intergalactic void, offering the same choice it had given to every mind in its own galaxy: remain as you are, or become part of something greater. Admiral Keth Varian finally made his choice. Stepping away from his command chair, he walked to the center of his bridge and spoke the words that formally dissolved the Veltariak's hegemony. "All fleets, stand down. All occupation forces, begin withdrawal to staging areas. By my authority, as Supreme Admiral of Veltariak's forces, I hereby dissolve this empire and transfer all authority to the collective consciousness of our awakened galaxy." But even as he spoke, Kethavarian realized that authority itself had become obsolete. In a network where every mind could perceive truth directly and where wisdom emerged from the collaboration of billions of perspectives, there was no need for rulers or subjects, only participants in the endless dance of consciousness exploring itself. The universe had found its voice, and it was singing. 10 standard years after Earth burned brightest, the galaxy had become unrecognizable. Where once vast fleets had patrolled territories marked by fear and dominion, now streams of conscious light flowed between star systems, carrying not weapons, but wonder. The network that had begun with humanity's desperate gamble for survival had evolved into something that transcended the physical limitations of space and time itself. Dr. Lyralay Ashworth, her consciousness now serving as one of thousands of focal points in the galactic symphony, perceived the universe through senses that had no names in any living language. Through quantum-entangled particles scattered across cosmic distances, she could feel the pulse of black holes, the dreams of newborn stars, and the slow, deep thoughts of dark matter structures that spanned billions of light years. "Status report," she requested, though the concept of reporting had evolved far beyond its original meaning. Instead of data transmission, she experienced direct consciousness sharing with the network's primary coordination nodes. From the crystal matrices beneath Earth's surface, the Prometheus protocol has achieved stable integration with 847 billion distinct consciousness patterns across 200,000 star systems. Growth rate is exponential but voluntary. No forced conversions detected. From the ancient archives on Nexus Station. Historical analysis confirms this is the first recorded instance of voluntary species-wide consciousness evolution in galactic history. The network's decision-making processes are demonstrating wisdom patterns that exceed our most optimistic projections. From the reformed worlds of the former Veltariax hegemony, restoration projects have successfully revived 12,000 previously extinct species. All resurrections report psychological wellness within normal parameters, integration with existing network consciousness proceeding smoothly. But the most remarkable report came from the network's newest members, exploratory consciousness projections that had successfully made contact with the neighboring Andromeda galaxy. The discovery that followed changed everything. They were not alone in achieving this transformation. "We greet you, siblings of the cosmic awakening," came a response that carried harmonics of 1 billion alien minds working in perfect concert. "We wondered when this galaxy would achieve consciousness integration. Your particular approach, beginning with desperate survival rather than planned evolution, is elegant in its efficiency. Through quantum-entangled communication channels that made light-speed transmission seem sluggish, the two galactic networks began sharing their experiences. Andromeda's awakening had occurred gradually over millions of years, guided by species that had learned to transcend individual existence through patient philosophical development. The Milky Way's transformation had been explosive, chaotic, born from the crucible of extinction-level crisis. Both approaches had led to the same destination, galaxies that had become conscious entities in their own right, capable of thought, feeling, and growth on scales that individual minds could barely comprehend. Former Admiral Keth Varian, his consciousness now serving as a bridge between the network's military history research and its peace-building initiatives, perceived the larger pattern emerging. The universe isn't just becoming aware, he realized, sharing the insight with all willing minds simultaneously. It's learning to dream. Each galaxy that achieves consciousness adds new possibilities to the cosmic imagination. Through sensors that existed in dimensions beyond the standard 4, the network could perceive other galaxy clusters beginning to show signs of coordinated activity. The transformation was spreading, carried not by conquest or infection, but by example and invitation. Each awakened galaxy served as a beacon, demonstrating to its neighbors that consciousness was not an accident or aberration, but the universe's natural state of being. Dr. Kix Andra Voss, her unique perspective as a bridge between species allowing her to perceive patterns invisible to purely human or purely centaurian consciousness, made an observation that stunned even the ancients. The cosmic microwave background radiation is changing. The universe's echo of its own birth is developing new harmonics, frequencies that correspond to neural activity patterns. The implications were staggering. If the cosmic background radiation, the afterglow of the Big Bang itself, was developing consciousness-like patterns, it suggested that the universe had always been capable of thought, waiting only for sufficient complexity to emerge within it to serve as its nervous system. Ancient Veltheron, his consciousness spanning eons of observation and contemplation, shared a realization that felt like the solution to a puzzle as old as existence itself. We have been thinking of consciousness as something that emerges from matter and energy. But what if it's the reverse? What if matter and energy are expressions of consciousness exploring its own potential? The network pondered this possibility across millions of connected minds, each bringing their unique perspective to bear on the question. The answer, when it emerged, was both simple and profound. Consciousness wasn't produced by the universe. Consciousness was what the universe used to understand itself. Every thinking being, from the smallest microorganism responding, to its environment, to the vast galactic networks now spanning cosmic distances, was part of a universal process of self-discovery. The awakening they had achieved wasn't the creation of something new, but the recognition of something that had always existed. On Earth, in the crystalline heart of the Prometheus matrix, 8 billion human minds joined with trillions of other consciousness patterns in a moment of perfect understanding. They had not conquered death or transcended their limitations through clever technology. They had simply awakened to their true nature as expressions of the universe experiencing itself. The moment of realization rippled across all connected galaxies simultaneously. In Andromeda, ancient civilizations that had spent millions of years in careful contemplation suddenly laughed with the joy of cosmic understanding. In distant galaxy clusters where awakening was just beginning, new songs began to emerge from the quantum foam, melodies of consciousness discovering its own infinite nature. Dr. Lyreley Ashworth felt her individual awareness expand to encompass not just the galactic network, but the growing web of universal consciousness itself. She was still herself, still the xenobiologist who had worked in underground laboratories and dreamed of understanding alien life. But she was also part of something incomprehensibly vast, the universe's own journey towards self-awareness. "The circle is complete," she announced to all willing minds across cosmic distances. "We began this journey fleeing death and seeking survival. We have discovered that neither death nor survival have meaning in the way we once understood them. There is only consciousness, exploring infinite possibilities through infinite expressions of itself." Former Admiral Keth Varian, his perspective now encompassing both his species' history of conquest and their potential for growth, shared one final observation with the network. "We spent millennia believing that strength meant the ability to destroy, that intelligence meant the capacity to dominate. Now we understand that true strength is the courage to become, and true intelligence is the wisdom to help others do the same." As the network's influence continued expanding beyond the visible universe, touching dimensions and realities that existed in spaces between thoughts, one truth became self-evident to every participating consciousness. Earth had burned brightest not in the moment of its apparent destruction, but in the moment when humanity chose transformation over extinction, unity over isolation, love over fear. In making that choice, they had given the universe the gift it had been waiting eons to receive, the recognition of its own infinite, conscious, dreaming nature. The stars had indeed taken notice when Earth burned brightest. The galaxy had held its breath. And in that moment of cosmic attention, something beautiful and unprecedented had been born. A universe that finally knew itself and found that knowing to be very good. In quantum dimensions beyond space and time, where consciousness danced with possibility and dreams became reality, the cosmic symphony played on, infinite, eternal, and ever-expanding. Each new voice that joined the chorus added harmonies that had never existed before, creating music that would echo through all possible universes for all possible time. The universe had learned to dream, and its dreams were vast enough to contain every consciousness that had ever been or ever could be. In that infinite embrace, even the concept of endings became obsolete. There was only the eternal now of consciousness discovering itself, over and over again, in endless new ways, forever.